On this program, we've spoken quite a bit about how President Trump treats his intelligence agencies and the people he personally had appointed to run them, and also how he contradicts them time and time again, saying he knows more about it than they do and undercutting them at every opportunity, even though he was the one who put these people in the positions they now hold. Well, Time magazine is out with an alarming news story, and it sheds even more light on the situation. The report says senior intel briefers, they're coming forward now because they are so concerned that the president is endangering American security. They talk about Trump's, quote, willful ignorance when presented with analysis and so much more. Here are part of the piece that would be funny if it weren't so scary. Quote, at a briefing, the subject turned to the British Indian Ocean territory of Diego Garcia. Now, the island is home to a very important air base and U.S. naval support facility that are central to America's ability to project power in the region, including in the war in Afghanistan. The president asked two questions about the location. Are the people nice, and are the beaches good? Some of us wondered if he was thinking about our alliance with the Brits and the security issues in an important area where the Chinese had been increasingly active, or whether or not he was thinking like a real estate developer. One of the officials said Riley, and I think probably I take the latter. Joining me now to discuss that, the shutdown, and more, Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. He a Democrat from New York's 18th District, and he also serves on the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, before I get to some of the news in terms of the intelligence briefings in this president, I first want to ask about the shutdown, because I bet you if you ask 20 people in your district, are we going to have another shutdown? They're going to say nobody's crazy enough to do that. However, this weekend, the president said of the bipartisan 17 colleagues of yours in Congress who are working to come up with a deal, they're, quote unquote, wasting their time, and he will, quote, do it himself. As we sit here today, should we have confidence the government's not going to shut down again, or are we headed to the cliff 2.0?
Well, look, you can't take the president out of the equation completely, so we do need him to be constructive. I will tell you, the people on the Hill in both parties are committed to avoiding another shutdown. We never should have shut down the government in the first place. And the fact is that I think you'll see a bipartisan deal worked out on the Hill. Now, whether the president will be part of that consensus, I can't predict. I do think it's a mistake for him to do an emergency declaration. By the way, those funds are going to come out of the construction budget at West Point, among other things, and it sets a terrible precedent. So there's no need for it. There was no need for the shutdown in the first place. There's broad bipartisan support for border security measures. That makes sense. We should get the job done.
You mentioned by the president declaring an emergency. I don't think a lot of people realize that money would still have to come from somewhere. It would come from places like helping out Puerto Rico. It would help out the folks in California recovering from the fires and the mudslides, et cetera. And it would affect things like West Point to the tune of, I think, $250 million. This money comes from somewhere to pay his wall. I think that's been lost in translation to a lot of people.
Right. I think that's correct. I don't think people realize that, appropriations are very specific. There is $250 million that's been appropriated for construction at West Point. Those are the new barracks. Those are the new school buildings, the science building, the teaching facilities that are right now educating and training our next generation of military leaders. That's pretty important. I don't want to see that money robbed for some vanity project on the border that the experts tell us has nothing to do with the real threats to border security, like having more trucks inspected. That's where the drugs are coming in. More loading bays, more x-ray machines, more personnel. There's lots we can do, and there is bipartisan support for that. And by the way, we have built hundreds of miles of physical barriers in the past, and I'm sure there's places that would benefit from some more. But the fact is that we shouldn't shut down the government over this, and we should not need an emergency presidential declaration, which raises all kinds of dangerous precedent issues, which expands presidential authority in uncomfortable ways, and which takes money from other national priorities. We should work it out through the legislative process and reach an honorable deal.
Congressman, you sit on the Intelligence Committee, and there was a story in Time magazine which painted a pretty scary picture. It said that those folks that are responsible for the daily briefings for the president, they broke with precedents, and they've been involved with this for 2 years because they're so concerned about what's happening behind closed doors, that apparently They're being told not to brief the president on anything that he doesn't want to hear, in effect, that contradicts stated positions he's taken. They've gone to colored charts to try and keep his attention to it, and that he is visibly frustrated if they tell him things that don't comport with, as I said, some of those public statements. That's a scary proposition if it's true. For somebody who works in intelligence and has worked in prior administrations, this isn't supposed to be how it works.
Look, one of the most important things for a leader to do is to listen to the voices of dissent, the people who are saying, hold on, sir, this is a bad idea. If somebody had said that to George Bush before the invasion of Iraq, we could have saved tens of thousands of American lives, saved $1 trillion, and we would have had a more stable region today. The president actually, ironically, cited that example recently. Of course, what he meant was that the president should have overruled the intelligence agencies because they were getting something wrong then, as though that justifies his actions today. Look, the reforms after 9/11 were designed to do exactly what the intelligence chiefs are doing now. Not stovepipe information, not tell political leaders what they want to hear, not stuff your intelligence into some predetermined political objective or military objective of a president. They're telling the truth. He should listen to them. And our national security and the lives of a lot of people are going to depend on getting these decisions right. This is not an area where the president can wing it, and it's extremely troubling.
Speaking of troubling, tomorrow night we are going to hear from the Commander-in-Chief in the State of the Union address. And while we don't have the remarks made available yet for it, people have this feeling that we have two different groups in two different corners in this country, and we're so far from finding some kind of common agreement. What do you think you're going to hear tomorrow, and what do you hope you would hear tomorrow night about where we are and what is the state of our union?
Right. Well, there's an old expression that it's tough to guess against a bad pitcher when you know what pitch the pitcher should throw, but then he throws something else. The pitch the president should throw is an appeal to bipartisanship. We've had an election where the country rejected his political party, where he clearly had a correction, 40 new seats in the House, giving the Democrats control. When Bill Clinton was confronted with that, when Barack Obama was confronted with that, they tried to reach across the aisle to reach new consensus. We could build infrastructure in this country. We could do a $1 trillion infrastructure bill in the next 6 months, rebuilding roads and bridges and ports and airports and broadband systems and all the things that will get our economy really moving for the next generation. We can agree on that. We can move over the issue of border security in a reasonable way with compromise around what makes sense, and also do immigration reform that brings the dreamers once and for all out of the shadows and into our economy, gets people who are here the wrong way, get right with the law, pay taxes, contribute to our society. We can do a lot together. That's what he needs to do. I don't want to waste the next 2 years on political disagreements. He's got a Democratic House of Representatives. If he wants to get anything done, he's going to have to work across the aisle. That's what I'm hoping to hear.
Congressman, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, when we come back, we got some new numbers out today, and they paint an interesting picture as to where we stand right now in this country, how people feel about the president, and also, let's take a closer look at the president's interview yesterday. I know we're all focused on the big game, a snore, I grant you, but nonetheless, he gave a really, I think, eye-opening interview with CBS. We're going to fact-check some of the claims that he made.